Metaphor ReFantazio might just steal Game of the Year with how things are going. If you didn't know what Metaphor is, it's being developed by the team behind JRPG legends like Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, and it will be standing along these giants as Atlus's third pillar. There's a good chance that Metaphor will be many people's first Atlus game, so before you buy it, we've put together a review and a list of pros and cons that you might consider before trying it out, because some of its strongest points might be a turnoff for other people. We'll be going over the story, gameplay loop, combat, presentation, and many more, so let's talk about it. First off, the main story and premise is very solid and engaging. To summarize the setup of the plot, the king just got assassinated and it threw everything into a political turmoil. Every single person in the United Kingdom of Ukraine is put into this election tournament, where anyone can become the new king, and we, the protagonist, are doing exactly that. This setup is quite interesting as well, because the protagonist is actually from the Elda tribe, which is the outcast among all the 8 tribes in Ukraine. It quickly becomes apparent that Metaphor does not shy away from touchy topics like racism, discrimination, poverty, corruption, and so on, but it touches it on a very mature way, which opens up many opportunities for interesting developments. Besides the election tournament, there's also another interesting side plot that is happening regarding the parallels of our real world and Metaphor's world. The protagonist has this fantasy book depicting our real human world as this beautiful utopia where everyone can live in peace. Us humans know that's not the case though, so watching people react to our own human world as if it's a fantasy is quite an interesting perspective, and it really makes you think if a fantasy world like that is achievable by the protagonist and us humans. But despite the engaging premise, it took around 10 to 15 hours for this plot to unfold, and in my opinion, I wasn't really fully hooked until it was revealed. Some players might find this prologue to be a little bit too long, but it does get better once the game opens up, and I am glad I stayed. Metaphor presents the sense of adventure and travel in a very unique way with the introduction of the Gauntlet Runner, your mobile base to carry out your political campaigns, traveling from city to city and gaining a following to become a worthy king of Ukraine. Traveling via the Gauntlet Runner felt like you were embarking on this road trip with you and your friends. During travel time, you can do various activities and chores to pass the time, like bonding with companions, cooking, cleaning up, doing the laundry, or just go to sleep. There's also lots of beautiful scenery to discover as you travel, and you'll immortalize that moment in the form of a painting. There's just something about the way Metaphor portrays this sense of traveling and adventure on the Gauntlet Runner, and it made the whole experience feel adventurous yet cozy at the same time. As seen in other Atlus games, the daily life and social sim aspect is a tried and tested formula that is very much loved by many, and well, it's here to stay in Metaphor as well. In between deadlines of the main operation, you'll have a lot of free time to carry out chores and activities. You can bond with companions, talk with various people, take on side quests, attempt to give a speech, admire the scenery, claim a bounty, and many more activities that you wouldn't expect a future king to be doing. One of your main goals is to improve your royal virtues, and it will determine what kind of quests or dialogues you can choose. So in a way, it's like a skill check, and all of those activities that you do will marginally improve your royal virtues. Lore-wise, it's very symbolic of the traits that are required to become a king, which is conveniently shaped like a crown. Besides the social sim, you have a bunch of your own chores to do. You'll be out on the road for long periods of time, so you have to prepare by stocking up on items, earning money, purchasing equipment, strengthening your character, training in combat, and so on. You can also revisit dungeons that you've explored before to level up characters or find all the chests that you missed, so the game is not super strict on completing every single thing. While these are all optional, it is highly recommended to do them, as they can be quite rewarding. Besides, a lot of them were quite funny and had interesting interactions with your companions, so it made them way more likable and made me learn a few more things about them as well. Overall, the daily life section of Metaphor is a very enjoyable gameplay loop, and it creates this very interesting juxtaposition of the future king just doing regular chores. It's kind of a humbling experience, seeing your protagonist's journey and efforts in becoming the king. The archetype system in Metaphor is very complex and provides a lot of opportunities for unique builds to suit your playstyle. But first, let's talk about what an archetype is. Essentially, it is the manifestation of the power of ancient heroes that your characters can call upon to aid them in battle. They might seem similar to demons or personas, but they're quite different. Archetypes follow a job system, as you'd see with other RPGs. Each archetype will wield different weapons, use unique skills, and have a general role to fill. However, what's cool is that these roles are not set in stone. Archetypes are able to inherit skills from other archetypes, so it's like combining two archetypes into one. With more than 40 archetypes in the entire game, Each one you unlock feels very unique from the rest, and they all feel satisfying to play in their own way. Overall, there's nearly limitless possibilities for builds and party compositions, so it never feels boring to experiment with. Despite the vast selection of archetypes, the way you obtain them might be unfavorable for some players. Essentially, archetypes are unlocked by forging bonds and connections with different people, which basically makes it mandatory to befriend everyone. So there's no choosing who you want to build connections with, so the lack of choices might turn people away, knowing you can't really change the outcome of things. And also, there's no romance. The combat in Metaphor is one of its strongest selling points, and is a display of Atlus's best work, combining the best of both worlds from Shin Megami Tensei, Persona, and other Atlus titles. Anyway, regarding combat, Metaphor introduces a hybrid battle system of action and turn-based. While on the field, you can attack and defeat lower level enemies instantly, which really speeds things up by skipping the slow turn-based combat. For higher level enemies, you can attack them on the field to deplete a gauge, and then it will stun them. And with the press of a button, you can enter turn-based combat seamlessly. Stunning gives you a huge advantage of dealing damage to all enemies, stunning them, and getting the first turn. And now that you're in turn-based combat, the introduction of the new formation system gives you a lot more offensive and defensive options, making your character deal or take more damage, depending on their position. Besides your regular skills, you also have something called synthesis skills, which are likely your most powerful skills, at the cost of more turns. They're a combination of two archetypes skills, which means you have to build your party correctly in order to use them. This adds an additional layer of team building on top of the archetypes that were mentioned earlier, as well as a strategic risk versus reward type gameplay. More importantly, it adopts a system similar to press turn from other Atlus games. You can gain extra turns by taking advantage of enemy weaknesses, criticals, blocks, repels, and misses. However, the enemy can take advantage of all of these effects as well, so it makes the combat in Metaphor feel very balanced, as if the enemy can do as much crazy stuff as you can, which in turn can make Metaphor pretty challenging at times. But luckily, there's a quick retry feature that resets the battle to the very first turn, and the info on weaknesses is saved, so you can reapproach the battle with the proper knowledge, which is a very nice quality of life feature. Overall, the combat can be quite challenging but balanced at the same time. It's a great blend of Atlus's best combat systems in one game. And speaking of which, you should check out this video on the top right corner to learn 10 very important tips and tricks that will save you a lot of headache. Now, despite the addition of action combat, it's actually pretty bare bones, but it gets the job done. There's not much beyond attacking and dodging your enemies, so it mostly serves as the means to enter turn-based combat. While you can defeat even the higher level enemies on the field, you're not able to deal damage to them while they've been stunned, so it ends up being very tedious. At the end of the day, Metaphor's main combat system is turn-based, and it's very much forcing you into it, which might turn some people away who were expecting a flashier action combat. Atlus games are well known for their stunning presentation and art direction, and that is immediately obvious in Metaphor. The UI is gorgeous and very abstract. The colors and textures of the entire game portrays everything as if it's in a painting, from the UI, sprites, backgrounds, skies, and world design. It's kind of symbolic, seeing how we humans are consuming their fantasy world as a piece of art, like a painting. The music also takes on a more orchestral and religious approach, which surprisingly fits with the setting of the game really well. And by the way, my personal favorite OST has to be the Academia theme. That's also not to mention the abundance of animated cutscenes in 3D and anime style, and they're always a treat to watch whenever they pop up. Many cutscenes in the game also have full voice acting, including the protagonist himself, which is a nice change for Atlus games. Overall, while not the most technically advanced looking game, Metaphor proves that art direction is way more important than graphic fidelity. The game looks extremely unique and plays around with symbolism a lot, which is always very interesting to notice. But while everything in Metaphor looks beautiful, some people might find it a little bit too abstract. The motion and menu designs could make things a bit harder to read for some people. And while on the topic of looks, the game on PC is actually quite unoptimized. There are noticeable frame drops in and out of combat, especially in larger areas, and the loading times between simple areas, like a door, can take close to 10 seconds or longer, which is a bit of a shame, despite the beautiful transitions. We think it's because Metaphor started development 8 years ago, and Atlus have yet to change their game engine, which is what they've done on their more recent games, like Persona 3 Reload on Unreal Engine. Besides performance, the 3D models can sometimes look a bit outdated, and may not perfectly match the beautiful hand-drawn art. A few patches were released here and there, and the performance improved a little bit. but hopefully this can be addressed further down the line, or it would be doing the beautiful presentation a small disservice. So before we give our score, I'd like to briefly share my experience with Metaphor. I had doubts at the start of the game because it didn't really hook me, but once past that point, the game really opens up with the Gauntlet Runner, which had the biggest impact on me in terms of the adventure and travelling. Getting into the daily life section was also pretty fun, seeing your future king just do simple daily chores. Combat wise, I spent a lot of time just reading archetypes and trying out some stupid builds. Like I personally ran a team of 4 brawlers and it still worked out. I do feel that the action combat is a bit lacking and perhaps more could have been done to make it more interesting. But I do understand that Metaphor is a turn-based at its core, that of which is super complex and very challenging. It's not unfair either because you and the enemy can take advantage of the same systems. Art style wise, this game is very beautiful. You can give me a random picture of the game and I can instantly tell it's Metaphor. I only found the main menu to be a bit hard to read at first, but I did get used to it eventually. If they can fix the performance issues, then it will truly do this beautiful game justice. To conclude things, Metaphor ReFantazio is certainly another Atlus masterpiece, and it easily stands out alongside their bigger titles like Shin Megami Tensei and Persona, while still combining the best of both worlds. We think Metaphor is also a great introduction to Atlus games, especially for newcomers and Atlus veterans alike. Overall, we crown Metaphor ReFantazio a 9 out of 10. And that's our review for Metaphor ReFantazio. Do you agree with what we said? And will you be picking up Metaphor for yourself? Cause if you do, make sure you check out this video on the top right to learn 10 tips and tricks that will really help you in your playthrough. And anyway, let us know what you think. And be sure to subscribe for future videos just like this one.